That's fucked the auto levels now for the whole episode.
I'm going to be super quiet. Right,
ridiculous. Yeah, here we go.
Oh, right, wake up.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. We are
Didn't write this bit, did you?
No, I did not. No. We are two gentlemen embarking on an extraordinary odyssey. I am Jonathan Dunn, and joining me is Chris Dow.
Pastry and Lego.
And we are going to be chatting about the video games around the world. And we are going around the world in 80 games.
That's better. That's better.
Better, isn't it? Yeah. All right, here we go.
That's my announcement, isn't it?
Do it.
Right, bing bong. Hey-o! A few quick announcements for you to kick off this spicy new episode. Firstly, going forwards, we aim to drop our monthly episodes on the 1st of each month. Obviously. Oh, you're doing number one. I thought you were saying, wait a moment.
Yeah.
Right, let me do that again.
Also, I'm pissing myself, so I'm doing a number one.
Hey! Firstly, going forwards, we aim to drop our monthly episodes on the 1st of each month. Obviously, you're all diehards who've rushed to listen to this, the first of our Round the World in 80 Games episodes, at the very earliest opportunity, and you will have realised that it is November the 1st. To streamline things for this season going forwards, you can expect episode 2 of this adventure to launch on the 1st of December, the following on the 1st of January 2024, etc, etc. It'll make things a little bit tidier for us, a little bit easier to follow for you. All good? Good. Second, please do check out o3c.games, where there are now quick...
We may be... I'm just going to do an insert announcement here.
Right.
However, we may still release a few bonus episodes in between the regular ones.
Oh, you cheeky boy. You cheeky boy.
Don't forget, of course, there's still several parts more to come from the Tears of the Kingdom spoiler special sub-series.
Secondly, please do check out o3c.games, where there are now quick access links to the following. Number 1, our weekly email newsletter, replete with what we've been up to, thoughts of the week, and any other old game-related gubbins that we can think of. Number 2, a link to our now public Discord. It would be lovely to chat with more of you. And 3, our still existent Patreon. As we've said a few times these last few months, Patreon no longer equals particular perks, but it does help us keep the lights on at O3C Towers. Of course, there is no obligation to subscribe, but if you like what we do and you want us to be able to keep doing it, do consider chipping in a few pence to keep the proverbial hamsters running in their proverbial wheels. Lastly, we have recently been blessed by the TikTok algorithm, gaining a swathe of likes, follows and interest off the back of some of our Playdate gameplay videos. Do check out O3C Games over on that platform if you want to see us, that is, two old men, attempt to navigate and negotiate social media in 2023. Right, boarding pass is ready, everyone.
We've now got a combined age of over 70.
Shut up.
Let's club together and get on the bus for free.
And some access to chair-based activities at our local leisure centre.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Genuinely searched for arch support slippers earlier.
Oh boy.
Right, here we go. Hello, wonderful world of pod, and welcome to the first in our brand new format series of Around the World in 80 Games. Every month, me and Chris will be virtually visiting a different country and celebrating its gaming history and output, and we are so excited to make a start on this absolute odyssey. Our first port of call is my literal motherland, and that is Denmark.
Hooray!
That's a Danish fanfare. Traditional. So, in a little bit, we'll be covering a smattering of the gaming output of the lovely little country, looking at their gaming development history, covering a couple of games in some big detail. It's going to be great. But first, what are you playing? Boom, 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 boom. What are you buying? Whatever.
Trying to find
We
what my
have
notes
got
are.
a month of gaming to catch up on. We'll chat properly about a few of the games we've been playing. But first, here's some headlines of the other bite-sized content we've been enjoying. If we go me, you, and then Mario.
I did organise the other one because I've only got 2 chunks to talk about on the main bit.
Okay, hang on. Yeah,
So
that's fine.
So I think I put. I can't remember.
I'll start with Mario 1. So we'll do headlines.
Yeah.
And then I'll do Mario Wonder. You do Mario Wonder.
Yeah.
I do Lies of P. You do something. Yeah. I finish off with Gumbrella.
Yeah, that's the one.
Great. Okay. That's my headline anthem.
Are you going to write that one?
It's already written. It's a piece of stock headline music.
Is it?
Yeah, I'll put it in over the top of that, and you'll see just how closely it lines up.
Oh, okay.
First, I picked up the new Not FIFA and hang on. First of all, I picked up the new Not FIFA game, and I wasted no time in starting a managerial career as Arsenal, getting rid of Eddie Nketiah. I fancied a bit of an easy, fun fantasy blast through the game, so I opted to have a billionaire takeover of the club, which I needed, so I could spend £304 million triggering Erling Haaland's release clause.
That really is playing the game on easy mode, isn't it?
It really is. Although, having said that, my first choice was Olivier Giroud. I really wanted to bring him back to Arsenal, but apparently he's not available to sign in the game because he's now classed as retiring. You would not believe. Retire. You would not believe how devastated I was. It's like buying the new Mario game, but you can't play as Mario. Like, what is the point? What is the fucking point in football if Olivier Giroud isn't part of it?
I agree.
Settle for Erling Haaland I did, and I backed him up with Alexis McAllister, Conor Gallagher, Harvey Elliott, and Michael Elise, and romped through a first season bagging the quadruple. Bish bash bosh. Onto FC25 now, why not? Next, a game that is way more fun than it should be. Power Wash Simulator.
Yes.
Literally just cleaning. Just cleaning. I spent over 2 hours spraying hot water all over a suburban bungalow. Had a wonderful time doing it. I mean, you mentioned it a few weeks back that it just gives you that constant dopamine drip feed, and I love it. It's the perfect game to relax to, like just happily playing a couple of hours every night watching celebs go dating or some other tosh. It's just, it's great. It's great. Next, I did push through the horrific gaming experience that is the new Pokemon DLC for Pokemon Scarlet/Violet called The Teal Mask. It's fortunately only a few hours long and it's a self-contained new area of the game, which led me foolishly to think that the performance of the game might improve in a smaller confined area, but absolutely fucking not. It is a full-blown shambles. I did the bare minimum required to get the new Pokemon in the Pokedex, pop them in my Pokemon Home living dex, and I've forgotten all about it again, thankfully. It's so bad. It's without a doubt the longest I've put into such a bad game. It's so bad. It's so bad. Finally, a little shout out to a lovely, lovely little puzzle game called Windowsill, which I'm not sure I've mentioned before. It's a really, really short, simple, and utterly charming, whimsical, just beautifully designed little game. You can play through it in about an hour. There's 10 puzzle rooms to work your way through, and it's just pure delight from start to finish. It will have you scratching your head and smiling your ears off several times. I try and play through it like every couple of years. Like I give myself enough time to forget about the minutiae of the puzzle solutions and just enjoy the satisfying clicking and discovering and solving. It's lovely. It's actually quite recently got a Switch port. It's a little bit pricey on the Switch, I think. I could be wrong, because it's only like £1 or £2 on Steam. But I definitely recommend, keeping an eye for it. When it goes on sale, maybe pick it up on Steam. It's just a lovely game. It's beautiful. What are your headlines?
Headlines. As it's half term, I've been doing a lot of organisation of my emulation setup on my Steam Deck. It is really boring stuff for most people, but I really enjoy it. I really like it. 2 platforms I had barely touched in terms of curation or management were the Amiga and the ZX Spectrum, and each has a whopping library. And even if my ROM sets for these machines are not fully complete, because that would be absurd, there's still 6,000 or 7,000 games to pick through across those 2 platforms. And I've been gradually sorting artwork, tweaking the naming convention so it is all organised and looks right in my library. But at the same time, I have enjoyed actually visiting some of these kind of unknown titles to me based on just screenshots and names alone, or sometimes playing through games that I've known from other platforms but are kind of different because they're here on home computer consoles or underpowered hardware from the time. So it's new ways to experience stuff that I might otherwise have recognised. I found a single screen shoot 'em up called Better Alien Than Dead that was fun enough, pretty bland, but something. I found a weird European exclusive platformer on the Amiga called The Adventures of Carlos, which was very nicely animated but dreadful to play. I played through some Spectrum ports of arcade games like Bomb Jack and 1942, both which translate quite nicely, even with the incredibly limited colour hardware of the machine. And I gave a good evening's play to the original Amiga version of Cannon Fodder, because that's where it started, and it plays best there. You know, it's a good game wherever you play it. There's so much cool stuff out there.
War has never been so much fun.
Exactly. But there's just loads of cool stuff out there, and even if it does take a bit of excavation to find the gold on these Wild West platforms, I do like doing it. It's just, you know, channel surfing through old libraries I get a real kick out of. The only other tiny thing I thought I'd mention here, because it's not really worth a big chunk talking about, a puzzle game launched on the Switch just a few days ago. I saw an article about it on Eurogamer saying this is quite addictive. It's called Suika Game, which is...
that watermelon thing?
Yeah, Japanese for watermelon, I believe. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly. But essentially, it plays like Threes or 2084. You're just trying to make small stuff bigger, and then the bigger stuff bigger again by matching them together indefinitely, it seems.
Easy.
Watermelon is the biggest thing. You're trying not to fill up your whole well with fruit before you obviously have the biggest objects in there for points. And I play a few rounds every now and again, and it's a lot of fun. It's about £2 something on the eShop.
Nice.
So I would highly recommend checking that one out if you like that sort of pick up and play super simple puzzle game.
Right, let's get into the meat of what we've been playing then.
Potatoes.
And let's get into the meat of these potatoes. Let's start in a wonderful place, and that is with the first brand new 2D Mario game in 10 calendar years.
Boy!
And what a wonderful game this is. Super Mario Wonder. It gleefully delights in subverting your expectations of what a Mario game is and can be. I was really happy that I managed to avoid a lot of coverage of the game before it came out, because being surprised by what the game does is the main source of joy for me. So I'm not gonna drop any massive spoilers, but if you do want to stay totally in the dark, then you can skip forward a little bit in the episode. So the new twist on the formula seen in this game is the Wonder Flowers that instantly turn your stages into trippy psychedelic mutations of what you've come to expect from Mario levels. The classic Mario pipes can turn into moving caterpillars. You could be suddenly plunged underwater. You could ride on some rainbow rockets. You could transform into a Goomba or like a ball of slime or a balloon or anything else. And it's just wonderful to be surprised in every stage with what it's doing. It rarely uses the same trick twice, and there were many moments when I was sure I could foresee like what the level was going to shift into, and then it just went in a totally different direction and made me laugh out loud. It was like a similar sort of experience to the wonderful time I had with Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and like the mouthful mode in that. It was always surprising, always funny. It's nice and also quite necessary that this game is basically built on all the Mario games that have come before, because in order to subvert all those expectations, they need to have been intrinsically well established over 30 plus years of gaming. But they've also incorporated so many things from like the more recent games as well, like the Wonder abilities often feel like a 2D iteration of like the Cappy transformations in Odyssey, or like the bonkers left field stage designs definitely feel like they've fed off the huge variety of Mario Maker creations that exist. Speaking of which, I would love a new Mario Maker game to give me access to some of these new tools to make some levels, because that would be all kinds of mad fun on top of just insane mad fun. I think the game looks absolutely stunning. Like, obviously the general art style is pretty tried and tested, but I mean, it's never looked better, and the animations are just incredible in this game. Like, the characters have never looked or moved better, with more just comedic touches and just lovely smooth details. Like, just going in and out of pipes is always really funny if you just really look and see what's happening.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. The other key new mechanic that's in the game is the badges system, which allows you to equip a badge per level to augment certain abilities or give you new ones. And these have a few purposes, namely, they help take the edge off the levels you're struggling with. There are badges that, let you jump higher or run faster, or there's more significant ones that give you essentially like a free recovery or conjures additional blocks. But it's really nice that the game has incorporated assistance in this way, because it means that the challenge is there for those that, want the challenge. But if you don't want it, if you are struggling, then it feels very much like it's built into the game, so you don't have to go into a menu and change the difficulty level. Having said that, I think I generally prefer the way that like the abilities and stuff work in the new Super Mario Brothers games, because you've got kind of like a full and more like varied moveset in those. Obviously, like the badges in Super Mario Wonder allow you to customize how you play the game depending on your general predilections or, what the specific limitations are of the level that you're trying to get through. But I don't know, I just really liked how the new Super Mario Brothers games felt like you were controlling a 3D Mario game, but in 2D, with like, like the triple jumps and the quick turn backflips and like the more fluid wall jumping. I just felt a lot more freer in those games than I do here, sort of rather than limiting myself to like one of those mechanics at a time. And there's also some ability badges that are definitely more of a hindrance than an ability that like I would never choose unless they're thrust upon me in like one of the challenge levels, which then just sort of feel like, I don't know, it's a bit more frustrating than challenging. Just like it's fine like having like the occasional ice level where things are a bit slippery, or an underwater level where things are a little bit floaty. But then yeah, there's some abilities that I just think that I don't know, there didn't seem a reason to make it, to put that in. It just felt like, well, you want to do this one? Well, I'll make it harder by making it more annoying. I'm not going to get too down on the game, because this is an absolutely fantastic game. But there's just a couple of other things that really niggle me as well. And I think, you know what, no, it's just me going to be having a moan, and there's no point. Like, it's things like, I think I said this before, like an absolute precocious dickhead. I said, I think we're in a post-lives era of gaming.
Yeah.
And I stand by that. There's no point in having lives in this game. It would have made more sense for like your coins to be your currency in the game, of having like another type of coin that you collect in like the wonder coins that you get, and spending those. There's also quite a few of the wonder seeds that you sort of collect through the levels. They're like the main things you collect. There's a few of those that are just like given to you, or you have to buy in a shop. And I don't see the point in them being in the game, because like in like Mario Odyssey, there's like 1,000 moons, so there's like a definitive amount that you need to get to. So it'd be like, right, well, we've done 970, so let's just have like 10 to buy in a few shops, and that'll get us to 1,000. Whereas this, it's not even like there's like 50 seeds per world. And so it's like, oh, we've got to 47, so let's put 3 in the shop. It's like all of the worlds have a different amount of seeds to get. So it's like, why just have ones where you're just given them? It just seems, I don't know. It just seemed, it made no sense to me, other than to have a little scene to go, here's a seed, help us. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's enough. I don't know.
It's a little scene. We love a little scene.
Yeah. Like I think I'm nitpicking, because it's a 9 out of 10 game, not a 10 out of 10 game. The one thing I will say, and I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, I did find the game a lot easier than previous Mario games.
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't utilise the assistance badges or like the new online play, which is really cool, to be fair. It's almost taken a leaf out of Dark Souls book, where like players able to leave like standees around the stage as clues, or as like emergency respawn points should you die. It's good. It's really good fun. It's a bit visually distracting, but like it is quite nice to have. I think there was probably only 2 levels in the game that actually really sort of gave me some problems, that I lost sort of like 10-20 lives on. both of them were like in the special world, like 5-star difficulty ones. But they, I will say that they had the vibe of something I would have made for you to play on Mario Maker, which is wavering precariously on the edge of hard and unfair.
Yeah.
But I beat both of them, and I've also 100%ed the game now, it was good fun. Like it was really really good. I did end up buying the game digitally because my physical copy of the game got delayed in the post. I know. I got an email saying some of the copies have been delayed, and I was like, this was the day after it had been released, so I was already miffed, and I was like, fine, I'll buy the game, downloaded it. Literally before it finished downloading, my physical copy came through the door. But I've been able to return it, so that's fine.
That's good.
But the nice thing about having it digitally is I've got the inclination to play through it again, and I'll more than happily start up on another save file. I might do an entire playthrough as one of the other characters, because I haven't actually played as any of the other characters, just Mario. And they've got different characteristics as well. So like Luigi obviously jumps a bit higher, and I think Daisy and Peach can do that floating thing on their dress. But also like the Yoshi characters and the Nabbit character, you don't get hurt, but also you can't transform in your abilities. So I don't know whether or not they are just like easy characters, or whether the fact that you can't have abilities will make it challenging in a different way. But I'm interested to see how they are. And even though the wonder flower surprises won't be quite as fun the next time round when I know what's going to happen, I'm looking forward to seeing the different animations for all the different characters and all their transformations, because that'll be just an absolute delight. But yeah, it's really really good. It is really really good. But I think for me the package of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, which combines an amazing 2D Mario game with the new Super Luigi U DLC, which is
the tough one.
The tough one. It's such a brilliant package that it doesn't quite trump that for me, even though it is absolutely brilliant. But you've made a start on it, haven't you? How are you getting on with it?
I have. It's been a real treat, like you say, and it's been a real surprising treat as well, because I knew I was going to buy it regardless, but I was kind of worried that, as what is likely the swan song Mario title for the Switch, I thought a 2D platformer could be a bit too safe in the shadow of like Mario Odyssey and Bowser's Fury. Yeah. And I was just plain wrong. Just wrong. Because, like you, after that initial reveal trailer, I essentially stuck my pre-order in and then just stopped looking at previews and pre-release footage, because I knew it was coming, so who cares, Yeah. I'm going to be playing it regardless, I might as well go in cold. And going in cold would mean that even if it was a safe game, a la a new Super Mario Brothers entry, at least the stage layouts would be all unknown and fresh, because I hadn't watched anything. So that was kind of my thinking. But from that initial reveal trailer, I knew that you could be an elephant. I knew that there were talking flowers that for some reason sounded like modern Sonic's voice actor. I don't know if it's the same guy, but it's very close. Yeah. And that was kind of it. And I really do feel it would have been so easy for Nintendo to look at the install base for the Switch, which is millions, roll out a cookie cutter New Super Mario Brothers U2, whatever you want to call it, something.
With Bono.
But just, tide fans over until the Switch's successor and be done with it. Launch the Switch 2 with Odyssey 2 or something along those lines, and just say this was your little stopgap, and that would have been okay, to be honest. But instead, like you've said, they've essentially pumped out a franchise-defining 2D Mario game.
Yeah. Because
it's every bit the proper sequel to the more experimental Mario games like Yoshi's Island before it. And I think New Super Mario Bros. Always felt like the natural follow-on to Super Mario World, in that it was about having really rock-solid mechanics, but they were kind of a bit limited in how far they were able to push the form of a stage, because it had to still be quite pure. They're very pure experiences, pure platformers. If you want to be good at a platform game, practice on those. That's like what platformers should feel like, the ideal kind of thing.
The fact that you can, in Super Mario Maker, you can essentially treat all the Mario games, from the original Mario Brothers 3, the SNES ones, and New Super Mario Brothers. You can essentially treat them as a palette swap.
Yeah. There's very small differences, but they're solid.
Yeah.
They're solid. And Wonder, on the other hand, is just batshit crazy from the moment you stick it on. And when I first booted it up, I'll be honest, I was nursing a bit of a hangover. I'd been out the night before. And after 3 or so stages, I just had to call it a day. Like, it was total sensory overload. I couldn't look at the screen anymore. It was like, this is too bright, this is too loud, this is too colourful. I need to just chill out. I'll come back to it tomorrow. And it looks incredible. I think the character art, like you've said, it finally matches, I think, the outstanding work Nintendo have put into their 3D Mario title for years. You know, I think the music is a joy. I think the variety on offer here in the stages is like best in class, to the point where Rayman Origins and Legends, which I would say are the second best pure 2D platform franchise we've had outside of Mario, really, in the last decade or so, they start to look a little bit vanilla in comparison. Because as much as they like to mix things up and give you a musical stage or give you something that's more like touchscreen based when you were playing it on the Wii U or whatever, every stage in Wonder is just like, here's what you thought was going to happen, and now something weird is happening instead. And
now you're a cake.
That's really fun. Like, I think it's probably, for me, in the small amount I've played, the best looking and playing 2D Mario in the modern era.
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from with New Super Mario Brothers. I do. But I think it just has something which makes it very like fizzy and exciting. And those games never quite captured that. They made me smile and I had a great time playing through them. But they didn't make me feel like Odyssey did, where it was just every moment was like mouth open joy.
Yeah.
And in this game, you know, there's content coming out the wazoo. It's a big platform game. I think it feels really tight to play. It's really nice to hold in the hand. And it's just creative and subversive at every turn. And like you've said, I don't want to talk about level specifics or gimmicks outside of the few bits you've kind of mentioned in passing. I just want people to go and buy it. You know, I would say that almost everyone listening to this show owns a Switch. And by extension, most of you have probably already bought Mario Wonder. But if you haven't, buy it and have a nice time. That is the O3C order of the week. Just go and have a nice time. You've earned it.
Well done, that man there. Or she. Do you know what else I've played?
Something not like Mario. Like
It's
the
not
anti-Mario.
Mario.
What is the
It's not quite-
anti-Mario?
The anti-Mario is Wario, I assume.
So it's very much coded in the lore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, please continue, Jonathan Dunn.
This is a total tangent, obviously not going in the episode, but sometimes, like when I do an audio test with an interviewee when I'm filming, the stock thing you say is, "Oh, could you just tell me what you have for breakfast?" It's like the industry standard thing. I'm anything but industry standard. So I'd say, can I just do a quick mic check? Could you just, what's the opposite of 10? And I found that the answer told me so much about the person and the type of person they were that it would really help me get into their mindset for how I did the interview. Because there's so many answers that feel right that aren't, that obviously there's not an answer to it. So people would be like, oh, minus 10? Or like 5? 20? 100? Yeah. The opposite of 10? 5?
My first instinct when you said that was just 1, but presented as if like 01. So you're just flipping it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that tell you about me?
It I don't know, but it gives me a sense of who you are, you know? Yeah. But it's I find it very funny. Don't get a lot of repeat business.
What? That's a oneer.
Yeah. Right. Ever since I first played Dark Souls. Oh, I tell you what. Can you just cue me in by saying, have you played anything else?
Have you played anything else? I know you've probably blitzed through Mario in like 2 minutes, so you must have played something else in the last 4 weeks.
I have. You're right.
Yeah.
Ever since I first played Dark Souls, I've had a perpetual itch in my brain that has needed the occasional satiating scratch.
Yeah.
There have been a couple of occasions where I have played 2 Souls-like games back to back, but usually after I beat one, I need a bit of a timeout. Doesn't take me long though before I have the urge to play another one. And it was really, really nice because when I discovered Dark Souls, I already had Dark Souls 2 and 3 and Bloodborne that had already been released, and they were lying in wait for me to discover. Sekiro was just round the corner too, and then there was a whole heap of Souls-inspired 2D games like Hollow Knight to fill the void. But since Elden Ring came along and blew my mind, I haven't had another 3D Souls-like game to tide me over, whilst I wait for the Elden Ring DLC. I did try and play the Nioh games, but I just didn't get on with them. It felt like they were trying to say, well, no, we're not like Dark Souls because you do this with the combat. And what I felt they did with the combat was make it annoying. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But then an indie game has appeared that looked to be, well, basically trying to be the next-gen Bloodborne remaster that we'll never get from Software, and that is NeoWiz's Lies of P.
Yeah?
Lies of P, also known as potty training my daughter. Have you done a wee? No. Sorry, I didn't plan on saying that. It's a terrible name, but it alludes to the story of Pinocchio.
Oh, fuck's sake! Yeah, when I've seen anything about this, I'd be like, oh, it's Bloodborne, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I didn't give the name any mind whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a terrible name. Like, I don't see. It's a really bad name. I wish they'd called it. They should have called it Liar if they were going to go on a spin. Like, just call it Liar. Yeah, Big Nose. Yeah, the Ballad of Big Nose. Yeah,
I'd buy that.
Yeah, exactly.
Be right up on the list.
It's very, very, very loosely based on Pinocchio. It's taken a few leaves out of American McGee's book, and they've basically turned the story of the dishonest puppet and transformed it into... I don't know why I find that funny. What a dishonest puppet he is.
Yeah.
And they've transformed it into a grimdark horror story, setting the story in a post-apocalyptic Victorian world after some puppety pandemic has caused all the animatronics to rise up against their makers and blah, 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 blah. Honestly, the story's fine. And it doesn't need to be based on Pinocchio. Like, with the sheer level of departure that they've taken from the source material, it's nice to see nods to the original story, but honestly, like, they could have just totally embraced it and just, like, made it their own, just made their own story, and they still could have done, like, puppets in a post-apocalyptic Victorian world, and they didn't need to base it on Pinocchio, and, like, you've got, like, a cricket talking to you. Like, the cricket is not called Jiminy Cricket in the original story.
Waste of time.
That's pure Disney. Pure Disney. That's a pure Disney creation. But the cricket in this is called Gemini, but it's pronounced Gemini.
Really?
Yep. Yeah. It's like...
Gemini.
Yeah.
Comma, the cricket.
Yeah. And, like, you have to fight off, like, a mad donkey, who's just a man with a donkey mask on, instead
Obviously.
of, the donkey. It's like, you don't need to do that. Like, you could have even, if you really wanted it to be like, oh, look, it's sort of a bit of a play on Pinocchio, you could have had those things in there, whilst also not going, look, this is Pinocchio. It just, I don't know, like... They could have just changed the names of characters and just embraced an original story of their own.
Can I assume that you level up your character by talking to Geppetto?
You don't, actually, but...
You don't? Okay.
You don't. You level up, obviously, by talking to the Blue Fairy. She's not the Blue Fairy, she's called something else. I don't know what. Can't remember what she's called. There is a little post-credit scene at the end of the game that reveals a tease for their take on another classic story that they will almost certainly be tackling next. So,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think they probably went, oh, we could do this. This could be the foundation for a series going forward. And sure, it is a thing. Like... But the story is good. Like, it's interesting. Like, they've had to... Like I said, the departure from the source material is so vast. They've got a whole lore of their own. So just own it. Just own it. Anyway, do you want to know what game they're not doing? They might be doing next.
I really do.
Wizard of Oz. Which I assume will be called like Lies of D or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably. So it wouldn't surprise me. Anyway.
But, I mean, she's not the liar, though, is she? It's the wizard.
I've never seen it. Yeah,
What?
the lies... I've never seen it.
Blowing my mind here. Like, everything about this segment is blowing my mind at the moment.
None of it's true. No,
I mean, this is the thing.
You never know, do you? You never know.
Recording the April Fool's episode in fucking October.
That's how I get you. That's how I get you.
It's called Gemini Cricket.
I know.
Oh, I can't believe that.
I don't Google it if you don't, because it is true.
I'll do it now. Keep talking.
Okay. Anyway, all of this styling is all just an attempt to mimic Bloodborne, From Software's PS4 Souls-like, which has not received its next-gen update, despite everyone desperately clamouring for one, or a sequel, which I'd also love. But it is entirely to NeoWiz's credit that Lies of P feels exactly like a From Software game, to the point where if you'd have told me that it was a high-end like asset swap mod of Bloodborne, I'd believe you. It feels utterly incredible to play. It's entirely unoriginal, of course. There he is, Gemini. Yeah, does it say pronounced Jiminy?
Not on that little excerpt. It might do somewhere.
I'm sure it will. Obviously, the foundation of the game and the way this game works is entirely unoriginal because it is directly copying Dark Souls. But then lots of people try to mimic great artists unsuccessfully, so it's a great achievement in that respect. The downside is that the game is pretty unforgettable. Honestly, there were times early on when I was only a few hours in, and I play a bit, I turn it off, I go back to work, and I'd just plain forget that the game existed, that I was playing it, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I'm playing that game. That's probably something to do with my age more than anything else.
Combined age of 70 plus.
Yeah. But the game is incredibly good. It's a really, really good game. It's insanely well made. It looks and feels amazing to play. It just doesn't occupy its own space in my brain. It's occupying the same space that's already, it's flat sharing with Bloodborne. That forgettability though, it did change eventually as I started getting more into the game, started getting pulled into that brilliant addictive loop, and also I started getting my head around some of the more original mechanics that they've put in the game, like its fantastic weapon system, which is pretty much all of its own. It plays into the handcrafted mechanical themes of the puppets. So when you find a new weapon, it's in two parts. There's the blade and the handle, and then you can go to a little workshop and you can swap the handles for different handles with different weapons. You can put different blades on different handles. It basically allows you to combine them in a multitude of ways to get a weapon that really, really suits your style. So the special abilities and the special attacks, or the buff moves that sort of the weapons have, they reside in the handles, but the elemental powers are in the blades. So I could say, I really like this special move, but actually that's on some fire weapon, but actually it'd be much more useful if it was on this electric weapon, so I can take it apart and put it back together, and hey ho, I've got it. And then the overall different attack styles, the properties of being like a great sword or a dagger or a spear or whatever, all of those things are then based on how you combine it and what the two things sort of come together as. And then you can also tweak the mechanics of all of those individual elements to turn them into things that will work better for you with whatever stats you're sort of aiming to level up. Or so you have a huge amount of control over your weapons, which is really, really great fun. And I think there's actually scope to take it even further with more weapon types available, which might be utilised if they do DLC or this sequel. And it is that element that really does set it apart from the Dark Souls game. especially when you combine it. You've also got like a puppety mechanical appendage on your left hand, which you can then equip with different things. I don't know. What do you call? I don't know. Bits, gears, things. I don't know. Abilities.
Things is good.
What was it? Prosthetic. It's like
Hey!
it's like the prosthetic arm that you have in Sekiro, where you can switch it out to go to different things, so you can do different things with your left arm, and it's the same in Lies of P. Again, not original, but also really cool. So you could have a puppet string lasso attack, or you could throw projectiles, or plant bombs, or do like powerful elemental attacks. So you've got a huge amount of control over the combat, and once you sort of get your mind around like the different enemy types, they're generally sort of split into puppets or humans or undead, and they all have elemental weaknesses, so you can then build weapons that are going to work best for certain areas and stuff like that. And it's really, really cool. It's really good. It makes you feel like really in control and like you've got one up on the environment, which is something you don't often feel in a Souls-like game. Like the level design and the enemy and boss designs, they're all pretty decent. I mean, it's not quite as seamless and original as what From Software do, but it's still, like the level design especially is. Hang on a minute. The enemy designs are pretty good, if not massively original. There are some pretty cool boss designs, as you would expect in a game like this. The level designs are really decent. I mean, it's not quite as seamless or original as like what From Software do, but it's nice to return to the sort of more linear level design structure of something like the Dark Souls games, as opposed to what Elden Ring did with its open world, which obviously I loved. But then it is nice to go back to these like claustrophobic levels, and see like the nice sort of clear shortcutting that you unlock, where you drop a ladder and then I've got a shortcut back to that save point or whatever. But there aren't any areas in the game that have that sort of feeling of like it really begs to be explored in the way that you do get in Dark Souls. But honestly, what we're doing here is essentially comparing an indie game to one of the greatest AAA game developers in the world. It is a staggering achievement what NeoWiz have created here, even if it is pretty unoriginal in the large part. Like, the game looks and performs amazingly well. Every bit as good as the Demon's Souls remake, which I think is probably its closest comparison point.
Yeah.
Also, the music in the game is utterly outstanding. Like, the general underscoring is really, really good. It's really beautiful. But one of the things, the collectibles in the game you unlock are vinyl records that you find around the world, and then you can take them back and play them in your main hub area. And there are some truly beautiful songs and pieces of music that then you can listen to whilst you're doing your upgrades and you're leveling up and your lore and stuff, all the stuff you do in your hub world. It's really, really exceptional. So yeah, I mean, it is absolutely brilliant. Like I said, it's not original, but we don't have Bloodborne on the PS5. If you're looking for something that's like that, get this. Because it's really, really good. It's definitely, I would say, it's definitely the best feeling 3D Souls-like game I've played outside of From Software stuff. Like, it's always the combat is something that these copycat games don't seem to get right. They never seem to get the weighty, crunchy feel of the combat quite right, or they try and overcomplicate it and do something different for the sake of being different, like the Neo games. But this is really exceptional, and hopefully now that obviously they've established what they have here with Lies of P, NeoWiz can build on that and hopefully have a bit more confidence to forge their own unique path into this market. And yeah, I can't wait to see what they do next. Really, really great.
Wow.
Jiminy approves.
Big Pinocchio vibes there.
Oh, one thing it does do is the loading screen has a little silhouette, a side-on silhouette, and his nose grows as the loading bar.
Obviously.
It says now lying.
Oh,
instead of now loading.
Oh.
Well, one thing I didn't say, the titular Lies of P is actually part of the morality system that's in the game, and you have that in Dark Souls with you can change the world tendency from being like light to dark by doing certain things and not doing certain things, and it can like shift the way certain enemies behave and unlock different areas. It's honestly, it's a system I never got my head around. But you do have that in Lies of P, where basically you have certain key story points where you can either lie or tell the truth. And the more you lie, the more you become closer to becoming a human, and that will depend on, and that will dictate what ending to the story you get. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty nice. I like it. I'll put that in somewhere.
Yeah.
Have you played anything else?
Yeah.
Other than the 2 hours of nauseating Mario Wonder.
I've been back into the Playdate big time in this last month.
It's a
mainly
Playdate.
Because I've had to do a lot of train travel to and from London in the last couple of months. And I just don't like taking my Steam Deck or my Switch with me on trips like that. They're too big, they're too expensive. The battery isn't that great on either one of them really for a long trip. And I have such big libraries on both that sometimes I'll turn them on when I am trying to travel somewhere or I'm staying at a travel lodge or whatever. And I just get a sort of choice paralysis, which means that half of my trip or time that I could be playing games on that trip is just spent loading and then loading a different game and then loading a different game because I can't really commit to wanting to play anything in particular. Last time when I was having to travel to London with this frequency, I was deep in the Fish and Feathers hole. And I played 20 plus hours of that just endlessly on the train going for high scores. And I loved it. But with that kind of done and dusted, it's left me to explore a couple other titles in a bit more depth, which has been, as with every Playdate sort of excursion I've had, really lovely. First up then, a puzzle game called Soko. It's on the catalogue. It costs about $1 and it's a great block-pushing Sokoban game. Really, really simple. It's got a nice difficulty ramp that sort of builds up very, very quickly, but it's a nice thing to just sit with. It's the sort of puzzle that would be really aggravating if you were playing it on a giant TV screen, because you'd almost feel compelled to just bash your head against it until you solved something. But when it's contained in this little dinky device with its crisp black and white screen, which is still just as nice today as when I first saw it, it just feels more manageable to stab at a puzzle, rewind a few steps, chip away until kind of the route through it reveals itself. It just makes things feel a bit softer than if it was kind of all-encompassing. It's everything in my vision and thought. Next up, a game from Season 1 that we were both a bit so-so on in our review at the time, but I've ended up going back to and really loving for the train. Zach Gage's Snack.
Oh, yeah.
Because
it's a good game.
Yeah, I mean, when we played it, we kind of said it's Snake with jump, isn't it? And that's about all we could say, because that is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think, I'd mentioned back in that episode that Zach Gage, he was quoted at the time as wanting to make a game that you could forget about completely for 5 years, but that it would be accessible enough that you could drop back and pick it up immediately. And this has been proof that he's absolutely succeeded. It's not been 5 years, but fascinatingly for me, having an extended break from it and playing it now by choice, as opposed to specifically for that podcast episode, it's just really clicked for me. The pace of it, the strategy of it, even the constant throbbing soundtrack of it is nice to have on headphones when you've just got the constant the whole time. I think it's a much greater success than I gave it credit for when I was playing it next to Sasquatchers, like a real kitchen sink effort game where it was just more, just push more into this thing. What can we do? More! Whereas Snack was just I will do one thing and I will do one thing well. And at the time it kind of felt but a second thing might have been nice, when in actuality, to go back to it now, I really appreciate that purity. Finally, the real jewel of my Playdate adventure in the last month or so, a former sideload from itch.io that got added to the catalogue literally days before we are recording, it's in this most recent drop, is a game called Sketch, Solve and Share, and it's just Picross, but it's one of the cleanest non-Jupiter Picross games I've played. It nails all of the tiny considerations that off-brand Picross games usually forget.
Yeah.
It's the tiny things like your cursor will wrap from the top back to the bottom of the board and vice versa when you're moving around, and the way that holding down the mark button and flying along a full column or row will fill in all the empty spaces, but not the spaces that you've already placed an X on. It's stuff that should be really obvious, but people often forget, because I think developing a Picross game is almost like developing your first basic Space Invaders clone. It's a proof of concept thing that it's just can I make the logic of this programming language work? Yes, ship it, that's fine. Whereas this is someone who said, I really like Picross and I want a good Picross on the Playdate, so I'm just going to refine it until it feels the best it can. It's other things as well, like the way the number clues at the top and the side are automatically kind of marked out once that rule has been satisfied. You know, whether you've hemmed in that square with X's or not, it's nice enough to say, yeah, you've ticked that one off, so don't worry about it. And it just makes the whole thing feel really brisk and snappy. My only criticism really is that due to the size of the Playdate screen and the developer's choice not to implement like scrolling in the puzzles, all of the puzzle boards are capped at 10 by 15. And this isn't a problem, as I think that's basically the optimum size for a puzzle before it starts to get a little bit long-winded and unwieldy. And I don't always enjoy playing a Picross puzzle that takes me 35 minutes. But every once in a while, I do pine for something just a bit more challenging. And as it stands, outside of 2 or 3 puzzles, maybe in the 200 or so I've now solved in this game, none have taken me more than 5 minutes at the absolute most to unpick. So it's not the most taxing selection. It is very good though. And what pleases me for the Playdate in itself is that this is yet another puzzle staple that I can now happily stow on the machine alongside Sparrow Solitaire, alongside Rain Blocks, alongside Smolitaire, all these games that I come back to again and again because they just fill a 5-minute void perfectly. It's a good machine. I really like it.
Wonderful. One last thing I'm going to talk about before we get into Denmark. So the amount of time we've been talking in the lead up is not going to be far off the amount of time the flight takes to get to Denmark.
But this is how we can do it, isn't it? We'll make sure that every episode we do, no matter where we're travelling to,
just
we'll
strap
consider
in for the 22-hour episode about Australia.
Flight time.
Last game I'm going to talk about is called Gunbrella, and it's a little action platform game from the devs who made the brilliant bite-sized Microvania, Gatto Roboto. That I played earlier this year, and that's so you control a little cat who could jump in and out of a mech suit and blast your way around a little, 2-hour-long map. It was great, it was tight, it was fun, it didn't outstay its welcome. I was under the assumption that Gunbrella would be another Metroidvania, and it's not. And it's obviously not fair of me to criticise it for that, but
and yet
I was disappointed.
Yeah.
It also took me a good hour or two before I realised that it wasn't a Metroidvania. It is just a straight linear action platform game, but it is really, really good. You play as a lone Gunbrellaman wielding the titular weapon that is, of course, part gun, part umbrella.
Yes.
The gun bit allows you to shoot, and you do unlock some different types of ammo for it, and the umbrella part operates as a shield and also as a Mary Poppins style floating device. It's nifty. It allows for some cool platforming moments or using the umbrella during combat as both shield and movement aid. It's got really good witty writing. It's got a good heartfelt story that, again, doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a brief game, maybe 5-6 hours. It looks really nice. It's got really, really good pixel art and effects. It's got loads of like gory, splattery bits and bobs that stain the walls after you've blasted people across them. It's a good time. And that probably could have been just a headline, couldn't it, that review? But I definitely recommend it. Like, pop it on your wish list. Maybe wait for it to go on sale because, I mean, it's only about 13 quid, I think, on the eShop, which, like, yeah, it might seem a little bit much for the size of the game you've got here. Especially, obviously, it's quite linear, so you're not going to play through it loads of times, maybe. But also, they're really, really good devs, and you would definitely support them. So, yeah, buy it. Buy it full price. Support them.
Okay.
I haven't written the theme tune for Around the World
It's
yet.
very important you do that.
I know. That's bullet point number 1 for tomorrow.
Right, are you going to introduce this little section,
Yes.
then I'll do my
Yes, I am.
history?
Yes.
Oh no,
So
you're
this-
first, aren't you? You're doing your...
Got some facts, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll do
that's
an
it.
intro and some facts.
Right.
This is our first stop on the Grand O3C Tour of the World, Denmark.
Hey!
To kick us off, here are some facts about Denmark. Despite there being no word for please in Denmark, they are one of the happiest countries in the world, with one of the oldest flags in the world. There are no mountains in Denmark, which probably explains why there are so many cyclists. There is an annual carnival in Denmark, held every February, where you dress up in silly costumes and hit a cat in a barrel. It's called Festalauen, and thankfully these days it's just essentially a big cardboard pinata with pictures of cats on it.
That's good.
And,
that's good. I was worried there for a moment.
And of course, Danish pastries are only Danish pastries if they are from the Denmark region. Otherwise, they should technically be known as sparkling cakes.
I could see where the punchline was coming.
Also, Danish pastries are Austrian.
Are they?
You've learned something there. Yeah, nothing to do with Denmark.
Oh.
Hope you've learned something there. Want to learn some more? There's a bit more. If you want to learn something more, and that's a bit more on brand and about video games, here's Chris.
Hey-o. It's actually really tough to put together a history of games development for any country. You know, whether that's your own home turf, whether that's one of the big hitters like the US or Japan, whether that's a smaller nation or something in between. Because there isn't an easy place to start, because games have essentially existed both as things to be played and things that would be developed in every single territory around the world since computers have existed. Anyone who's picked up a computer has generally, throughout time, gone, be nice if I could play a little game on here. And that's where things are born. It's just essentially wanting to kill time, wanting to do something fun with a device that you suddenly realise has the capability to perhaps do something more than run a spreadsheet or something like that. And so instead of trying to say, on this day in this year, this is when games started in Denmark, which I think is physically impossible, I've tried to pull out a few notable games, studios, or examples of kind of milestone releases. You know, thinking about things like milestone releases. What was the first major game to come out of Denmark? No idea, but I can at least tell you about some of the names that you may or may not be aware of.
Canabox.
Though perhaps should. Boxcat. The big ones then. And these are both studios that we're going to explore in some way a little bit further in the episode. Are IO Interactive, most famous for the Hitman series, and Playdead, most famous for Limbo and Inside. They're the big names from Denmark and Danish development. IO have existed since the late 90s and have essentially worked to refine the Hitman formula since their inception right through to present day. You know, the first Hitman game debuted in 98, and the most recent iteration of the franchise is still receiving active support in 2023. That has very much been their bag for that whole time. But they've pumped out other titles here and there as well, though. I remember Freedom Fighters, a squad-based third-person adventure game. It reviewed very well in like the PlayStation 2 era, even though I've still to this day never got round to checking it out. But the formula for that game would arguably set the groundwork for their later Kane and Lynch duology, which again was squad-based third-person shooting, which I do have a surprisingly large soft spot for. Not going to talk about it today, but the first game is pretty average but enjoyable. The second game does a lot of pretty cool things that I think would be cool to explore at some point. Contemporary to those violent, mature games, Kane and Lynch, IO also chucked out Mini Ninjas, and that was a platform adventure game that appears to have been a reasonable hit across the Wii and the 360 and the PS3. I've never played it. And, you know, more recently though, although Hitman still remains their bread and butter, like I said, they are currently developing a James Bond title as well, which, although licensed, seems unlikely to stray that far from the Hitman formula that they've refined, so could be pretty exciting. If IO are the country's most recognisable AAA developer, Playdead are surely the biggest AA team, if we can use that term. Even if Playdead have only shipped 2 games, they are wonderful games. And we've talked a lot on the show in the past about 2010's Limbo and 2016's Inside. But I do think for here it's worth mentioning the cultural significance of Limbo especially, because alongside other games like Braid and Super Meat Boy, it undoubtedly was part of that movement that was heralding essentially a new era in games, and one where development costs of big marquee titles had ballooned enough that publishers like Microsoft, you know, industry leaders at the time, started to look for cheaper solutions to finance and support to fill the gaps in schedules. And Limbo released at a time where indie began to straddle everything from a single designer in a bedroom through to 50 plus people in an office. And the success of titles like Limbo absolutely made this avenue to AA that I've mentioned like a properly viable market. So I think it really is important to consider that in that context, to say this was not a huge budget game, but it was also supported way more than most indie titles had been to that point. And it's quite exciting to know that that was happening in Denmark. Outside of these big boys, you may have heard of some of these other Danish hits. The iOS mega hit Subway Surfers came from the Danish mobile developers Kailu Games, apparently. Affordable Space Adventures, an eShop exclusive for the Wii U that people at the time heralded as a game that actually uses the gamepad properly, came from a small Danish team called Napnock Games. And a few modern indie hits like Where Is My Heart, which I originally played on the PSP, Mutazione, and the extremely recently released Salt Sea Chronicles have all come from Copenhagen-based Die Gut Fabrik. So there's another team doing good work out of Denmark. Hugo, the weird mascot troll character thing that I always see pop up when I'm scrolling ROM libraries, is in fact a Danish-designed animated TV star from the 90s and has seen about 10 or so video games since then, almost all designed by a variety of smaller Danish studios. So they're keeping it close to home. And finally, modern co-op hit Deep Rock Galactic, that I'm pretty sure I got in a Humble Bundle and just never installed on my Steam Deck, is also from the Jolly Land of Lego.
It's a PS Plus monthly game, so I've got it as well.
We've all got it.
I know that the Chat of the Wild Boys got into it a bit because you can do it like co-op and stuff. But I never had a chance to properly get into it.
So this is a tiny snapshot, really, of a country that, if not consistently responsible for massive headline releases like Hitman, it has had a quietly burgeoning scene and culture of modern indie developers, as well as smaller teams, that extends back to the 90s, really, when a range of Mega Drive and early 32-bit releases trickled out of the country too. Some games I've played, if only for 5 minutes, via emulation, like Subterranea, Sword of Sodan, they're both Danish. Some modern games that I've seen on kind of storefronts like Steam, but not checked out, like Kalimba, The Silent Age, they're Danish. And Ghost Runner, that we both played, but only you beat, because I am shit at video games. That's Danish too.
Ghost Runner 2 is out and on its way to me now.
Well, there we go. Basically, there is a lot to choose from if you are after some digital pastry. You all right?
Yeah, sorry. My PS5 just started up for no reason at all, but then I remembered that I remotely installed Alan Wake whilst you were talking.
So, I'll say it line again, just so
yeah, sorry, scared the shit out of me.
So basically, there's lots to choose from if you are after some digital pastry. But today, we're going to cover a pair of games in more succulent detail.
Yeah. So, the format we've decided to adopt for this series is essentially covering 2 games per country, like a more well-known game and a lesser-known game as well. So I'm going to kick this off with, as Chris has said, Denmark's biggest gaming export, which you probably didn't know until now was developed in Denmark. You're welcome, brains of the world. That's the Hitman franchise from Danish developers IO Interactive. So I'll preface this by saying that most of this is brand new information to me because I've never played a Hitman game before last week. But I really wanted to do, I wanted to properly give some context for this coverage. As long-time listeners will know, neither me or Chris are massively into the big AAA game releases that most people might queue up on day one for. Stuff like Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Horizon, Battlefield, Far Cry, like those sort of games. Obviously, I am first in line for a lot of big game releases, especially, Nintendo ones. So I'm absolutely not being critical of the big franchises. Just simply saying that they're not really generally the games that I want to play immediately.
Yeah.
And I would put Hitman in that category. Like, I don't really remember the first Hitman game coming out. I thought it was on the PS2, but apparently the first game was just a PC game.
Yeah. But
then the sequel came out on consoles. And even though I had a GameCube, there was a GameCube version that came out, it just didn't massively interest me in the same way that something like Splinter Cell did, which, is very much in the same wheelhouse, stealth-based, espionage/murder, depending on how you look at it. Depending on how cool the protagonist is, I think.
Yeah. Sam Fisher, murderer.
Yeah, exactly. James Bond,
murderer.
Murderer. Yeah.
Also
/ womanizer.
Cunt.
in those days, like before rampant online activity and, you know, bigger pockets for your money and more pocket money, like we'd only really play what our mates were playing, or, you know, what we were chatting about, and that was generally just Nintendo stuff for me at that time. And I think by the time the Hitman series had gained traction with a slew of sequels of that era of consoles, I just sort of accepted that it wasn't going to be a series I was ever going to really get into. Like, in doing some research, I see that, like, the first Hitman game on the next generation of consoles, so like the PS3, that was like after IO were, well, basically Square basically published the game, but they also deviated massively from the popular format of that first batch of games. They sort of hijacked the series, I think, once they saw some potential in it, and people weren't happy with it. Then there was a whole lot of legal jumbling and license acquisition, blah, 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 blah. A few years later, they did a soft reboot of the series on the subsequent console generation, PS4, etc., with Hitman. And followed up by Hitman 2, and then Hitman 3, which is the first time they'd actually numbered the games, because the first game was called Hitman Codename 47, and I was
true.
Didn't play the first 46. Hitman 3 is now the first current generation release, and handily, for me at least, that trilogy of modern games has been remastered and re-released in one pack called Hitman World of Assassination, which is what I picked up to sample before chatting about it. So for the uninitiated, as in me last week, Hitman follows a cloned contract killer known simply as Agent 47. You travel the world assassinating various targets that are assigned to you by the, hopefully fictional, International Contract Agency, which I guess is probably what privatised murder would look like.
Yeah.
Vote Labour. You're dumped... You're dumped into a sandbox scenario and can then go from there to achieve your objectives by literally any way you want. It's really, really good fun. And it does cater to absolutely all types of gameplay. If you want to be sneaky McStealthface, you can attempt the perfect silent assassination. You can, take people down silently, stashing the body, stealing their outfit to disguise your way through restricted areas, lockpick doors, and poison the target's sushi platter before making a swift getaway down a drain pipe. You could be a bit more brazen, leave a few obvious bodies in your wake, stir up some commotion, and shoot the man from a distance while people are distracted. Or you can strap up and go in all guns blazing, running, jumping, shooting, throwing some grenades, weaving your way to your target and limp away, trailing blood in your wake. It's actually quite overwhelming when you're first dumped into a mission.
Yeah.
With just the sheer amount you could do. You often don't really know where to start. There are some really good and comprehensive tutorial missions that see you assassinate Chris's doppelganger, so that's really good fun.
What's his name? Jasper something.
Jasper, I don't know. Jasper Meyerowitz? Oh no, that's... Hang on.
I mean, I only know about this character really because when I was working at my previous school, I once
Jasper Knight.
There we go. I once had an email from one of my sixth formers that I taught photography to at the time, just with a picture of Jasper Knight attached, with the sort of message at the top just saying, "Why has my game asked me to kill you, sir?" So if anyone wants to see that picture, please Google it.
Check out our TikTok. I put something on there.
Yeah.
But like the more I played of the game, the more I realised how much I could take my time with what I was doing. It isn't like Assassin's Creed or Splinter Cell where like you need to strike quick or you'll miss your chance. You really can take your time. You can plot, plan, blend in. So you don't need to know what to do first because there isn't a right, there isn't a wrong. You can afford to just wander around for a bit and just like scope things out and get some intel. There's something incredibly cool and also quite tense about this approach that I really wasn't expecting. And I've been playing the Hitman. Well, yeah, I've been playing my way through this game in tandem with the new Spider-Man game on PS5, and I really enjoy doing the stealth takedowns in Spider-Man, which is ludicrously straightforward compared to how you have to do it in Hitman.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just press a button and web up a bad guy who your augmented reality heads-up display has conveniently labelled safe to do so with. You know, you have to be aware of who else is around, who might be able to see through your disguise. So if you're dressed up as a waiter whose body is cooling off in the freezer, you can't just waltz past the manager who probably knows who is and isn't on their staff.
Yeah.
You can't just magically dispose of a body. You have to find a convenient place to hide it, ideally before you take them down, so you can then drag them quickly and efficiently to the hiding place. Like, I'm a few missions into the first Hitman game portion of this World of Assassination trilogy, and it has been really, really fun, and there is something very satisfying about playing a proper AAA title, especially one that's actually released, or at least swiftly patched to a very, very high degree. Like the gloss and the sleekness, between this and Spider-Man 2, I really feel every inch of power that's coming out of my PS5.
Yeah.
And just the technical, just the technical achievement of these Hitman missions is absolutely astonishing. Like the amount that's happening at any one time, like there's so many people. Like, there's so many. It's annoying because there's so many witnesses, but like there's so many things to be aware of. There's crowds of things. There's every single detail has to be in place so that you can examine it. And I don't know how it's doing it, because all of these people look and move really authentically and organically, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Is the word for it. It really, really is. Like, it's a feast to get yourself into if that's what you're in the mood for. Like, it requires a very, very different part of my brain to what something like Spider-Man does, or even, something like a more it's something like a quicker stealth game, even something like the Thief games, where you do need to sort of take your time and crouch in the shadows and wait for your moment, feel like a fucking arcade mobile game compared to this. But it is a feast to get into. Like, it feels like, right, I'm booking out this evening, I'm gonna do this one mission. It's like it really feels like you can get into it, almost like Football Manager, where I feel like I want to get like suited and disguised up, so I'm ready to put a barcode on the back of my head. That's why I shaved my head, so I could be like Agent Hitman. I found myself like more invested in the wider lore of this world and the character than I thought I would be. I think, like, a side effect of having a fairly anonymous protagonist, I assumed he was going to be just a bit bland, but that is definitely not the case. It's helped by some just really cool voice acting. It's the same guy, actually, who's been voicing him for like over 20 years. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And it's also one of the only factors that kind of gives away the Danish roots of the game, because there is just a very slight Danish twang to his accent. I did some research. He's a British-born actor called David Bateson. He's been based in Denmark for like 25 years, something like that. But he was also brought up in South Africa, so that may
could be that little
account
tinge as well.
for an interesting lilt to the
medley.
Accent. But I also found he's got another video game connection further than Hitman, because he did the voice of Bowser in the Danish dub of the Super Mario Brothers movie.
That's some trivia for you, isn't it? This is why you're watching this show.
But like, I'm going to be looking out for things throughout this series, like evidence of the country of origin in the game itself. I mean, granted, sometimes that's going to be more obvious than others, but like in a game like this, that is, is there a Danish flag? Is there a Danish flag? Is there some bacon? But like in a game like this that is obviously developed somewhere so close to home for me, like I want it to be more Danish, but admittedly, Agent 47 doesn't get the chance to cozy up by candlelight and have a Danish hugger, or take a break and have a hot dog with remoulade. But I will say that the clean, efficient, clinical nature of the operations is a fair representation. of the Danish's slick work ethic.
Of the Danish people.
Have you ever played a Hitman game, Chris?
Oh, bits and pieces. I mean, Hitman as a series, I really feel just isn't for me. Like, my earliest exposure to the whole franchise was through a preview in a magazine, probably like Computer and Video Games. As a kid, I used to have a subscription to Computer and Video Games and also the Beano. I had the two at the same time. But I assume...
that Venn diagram, you're right in the middle, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Like, I vaguely remember the things the writer was delving into about the gameplay of that first PC exclusive entry. It felt exciting just because I couldn't play it. You know, basically when I read those magazines, not having the hardware or not having the money made any game more exciting. So I remember reading a preview of like Quake on the PC and thinking, oh, I'd like to play Quake, or Dragon Force on the Saturn, or Rage Racer on the PS1, or Half-Life, and Hitman as well. Like, all games that if I have played, it's been much later in life, because at the time I was a wee boy and my pocket money would not stretch to these sorts of things. So it'd be a while until I'd get a chance to actually experience the Hitman action. To really out myself for the third or fourth time this episode as an ancient old man, if that wasn't clear enough already, when my local branch of Blockbuster opened, you know, a video rental franchise that we must remember entered administration back in 2010, they ran a promotion for anyone within a certain adjacent postcode that would entitle them to 2 free rentals. Yeah.
There's people in secondary school who never know what Blockbuster was.
Yeah, I teach most of them. But yeah, you got 2 free rentals if you live nearby. And as a family, we rented some film that I do not recall. And I also rented Hitman 2 on my relatively fresh PlayStation 2. And to really sell how little this game connected with me, as a teen, at a time when games were everything in my young life, and mature games in particular were the thing to cover and play, I put Hitman 2 on and I just felt utterly lost. Like, the beginning of the game, why was I changing into the gardener's clothes? Why was I being punished for shooting someone that I'd been told was an enemy? Why did I die so easily? Why was I having to stand in the bushes like a peeping Tom, watching NPCs wander about, but not actually interacting with them directly? Like, it just didn't make sense to me then. So I took it back to Blockbuster when my rental was up and didn't really think about it. I tried again with Hitman when Absolution on the PS3 came out on PlayStation Plus, I think, so it was a freebie. At that time, obviously, I was in my 20s rather than my teens. I bounced off it again. And then finally, I did give the modern Hitman trilogy a go on the PS4 in my 30s, and once more just didn't have the patience or precision to learn the world's rule set and properly work to exploit it. You know, all the things you've just described having to do as like a new player, I tried and failed miserably. You know, I really did. I know these are good games. I know that the modern world of Assassination series is considered essentially like best in class when we're talking stealth, or what it really means to offer a proper sandbox in a focused, smaller environment. It's just too much of an undertaking for me, though. Like, I remember trying to play through a stage set around a fashion show in Paris. It might be the first one of the game. It might be early on.
That's the first level.
Literally the first level. There we go. And I just found the amount of things to keep track of too overwhelming. Because in the first minute alone, you need to have made countless micro decisions. And like you say, it's not that there is a right or wrong way of doing things. But for me, I was like, do I need to be tracking this guy? Should I be finding another weapon? Do I need to change my outfit? Should I enter from the front or back or side or roof or fucking window? Should I mingle with people? Should I stay hidden? And with all of it, it was just too much for me. And the final nail for me trying to get into the series at all was, back when it was contemporary, the live time-limited events and contract targets that I saw being shared on social media. You know, it boasted about, you know, go and take down this person in the next week for this magic reward. And because of how I play games, that then made me worry that if I ever did pick the thing up, like if I picked up the modern version you're playing, have I already missed out all this stuff? Has it been put back in? Have I been diddled out of unlockables or content just because I wasn't quick enough to buy and play and obsess over a game? I don't know.
Ooh,
They're all me problems. You know, I get that. Watching a little footage of the game this morning, you can tell within a second this is a game of quite astonishing craft. You know, and I realise that those who enjoy it really enjoy it because it is completely non-linear, essentially, how you approach these stages. It's got this kind of unfolding puzzle box design, so you need to think on your feet. It's got these incredibly advanced AI routines going on in every single character's head across the map. But for me, it's too much, and it's been too much from its inception. You know, the little pull quote that I would have read in computer and video games when I was a teen for Hitman Codename 47 all the way back in 2000, that was trying to draw me in by promising a level of choice and freedom that seemed alien because of how broad it seemed, you know, really enticing. But that is the exact part of the franchise that has always now kept me at arm's length when I've tried to play, because in actually trying to do that and being told, do what you like, just do what you like, I'm like, but also tell me what to do. It's like, I will do what I like, but also just point me in the right direction at the start, just get me going, like a rolling start, and then we'll pick it up from there. And it's too much for me. It's too much.
So to the to IO developers, Chris would like you to chat with Ubisoft.
Somewhere in between. I don't need it so telegraphed that the entire map is just markers you walk towards. You know, I love how open...
But sometimes.
Yeah, I love how open Breath of the Wild is. I love how open Tears of the Kingdom was. So I appreciate big open design. I even enjoyed how Elden Ring worked, you know, for the time I was playing that. But there's still, in all those games, a level of kind of implicit direction that I don't think Hitman has as directly. You know, it's not as kind of overt in saying, to get started, this would be a really good point to aim for. And I feel like I just need something like that to maybe ease me in. But yeah, I know it's a good game.
Yeah, a bit of cognitive Vaseline. Over to you.
Do you want to hear about a game that is absolutely, for me, tacked on? Chris Dow is going to love this game as soon as I heard about it.
Yes, please.
Cocoon. Because if Hitman was a series not for me, Cocoon, from my very first exposure, was going to be my bag. Because I wasn't even aware this was in development. And you sent me a panicked text one evening that read something along the lines of, new game from the Playdead guy. and that was enough to me to go and find a review. I read one paragraph on Cocoon, the game in question. Then I immediately closed the tab and knew pretty confidently that at some point soon I was just going to buy and enjoy that game. You know, from the first few lines, I was like, yep, that's for me, that is. Cocoon is an indie game. It is the first game from Geometric Interactive, which is a brand new indie studio based in, you guessed it, listeners, if you've been following along, Denmark. Copenhagen as well, because everything seems to take place there. They're a relatively new company. They're headed up by Jeppe Carlsen, who we've already kind of touched on today because they worked at Playdead as the design lead for Limbo and Inside. After leaving Playdead, Carlsen would create the abstract games Thoth and 140, both quite slight but interesting titles that explored first a twin-stick shooter and then kind of a rhythm platform sort of hybrid, respectively. And now, with a new team in tow, Jeppe is back with Cocoon, a brand new puzzle adventure, not necessarily in the mould of Limbo or Inside, which both used 2.5D perspective to power their storytelling and gameplay, but absolutely linked in some of its puzzle and world design. I think it's really clear that this has come from a mind that made those two games, basically. The whole thing is viewed from an overhead perspective. You're a weird bug man, and you begin the game able to wander about and interact with objects and switches. It's really stripped back one button control in that you can move with the analog stick and press on my pad of choice, the A button, to interact, and that is literally it. That felt quite limiting in the first few seconds where I was thinking, oh, it'd be nice to run or jump. I'm playing it on the Steam Deck.
Oh, okay.
It'd be nice to, you know, it felt like I should be able to run about or jump or do something. But as soon as you understand what the crux of the game actually is, it all makes sense why it has been set up in this way. Because Cocoon is all about solving spatial puzzles, where the components needed to solve these puzzles eventually end up being spread between multiple worlds or planes. And as you progress through the game, you access more worlds by collecting little orbs. And these orbs can be carried one at a time over your head and are used both to power pieces of technology scattered throughout each stage. But more importantly, when they are placed inside warp points, they act as portals, and then you can literally dive inside the orb to access a completely different world, completely different space.
Yeah, they are the worlds.
They are the worlds. They are little globes. The orange orb you receive early in the game houses the rocky desert world that you start in, whose windy, Foley-led soundtrack put me in mind of Lonely Mountains Downhill.
Oh, yeah.
The green orb you receive after besting the first boss lets you visit a wet, rainy, swampy world, which reminded me, to make a pretty niche reference, to the Channelwood age in the adventure game Myst, with its kind of like raised houses over water.
Shit.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's at this point with two but it's at this point with two orbs at your disposal that the game becomes fully actualized. That's when it's suddenly like, this is the game. This is Cocoon. Because puzzles start to trade on your ability to move between multiple spaces with ease. And the first time that I did a puzzle that made me shout and point at the TV like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I was presented a long horizontal walkway with a warp point at both ends. I needed to transport an orb from my starting point to a device at the end of the walkway that it would power some other thing. But environmental hazards meant that I couldn't carry the orb safely through this passage. Are you listening out for Honora?
Yeah.
Is she okay? Probably. After a bit of head scratching, I realised that I could enter the first warp point, still carrying my orb, drop it off on a handy little pedestal in that world or layer, whatever you want to call it, walk back to the puzzle without it, walk safely under the hazard, use a second warp to return to my standee, and then bring it back to where it was needed, like circumventing the blockade by way of this sort of Inception-style layered staging cupboard. Whereas Limbo, and especially Inside, felt like atmospheric adventures first, with puzzles just an additional part of their worlds. I feel like Cocoon is built entirely around these little puzzle box challenges. And that's not to say it's not evocative in its visual and audio design, because it looks and sounds fantastic. It's a really beautiful game. But the crux of what makes Cocoon tick is different. There is world lore here to unpick at your own pace. You've got environmental design that has you kind of question the history of these places and their hybrid mechanical and organic mashup designs. You've got strange floating black rhombuses that I haven't yet figured out the purpose for. You've got bosses that protect the aforementioned world orbs, so they must have come from somewhere. They must be there for a reason. And you've also got these kind of collectibles to find off the beaten track. And these are particularly interesting because they're not just audio logs or something like that. They are literal creatures that you unearth that are tied to the game's achievements that are referred to as moon ancestors. Strange bug beings, a bit like yourself, that rise from the ground when triggered, that appear to harken back to like an ancient civilization that may offer a bit more colour and history to the whole world. I think it's a very, very good game. From Denmark, no less. I think I'm about halfway through. Estimates put the whole length at a very manageable 6 or 7 hours, so...
Sorry, 1 second.
That's all right. Just a little bonus for anyone watching the video on YouTube. Hello. We good? Okay. I think it's a very, very good game, made in Denmark, no less. And I'm about halfway through. Estimates put the whole length at a very manageable 6 or 7 hours. But I haven't wanted to blast through this. Like, it's felt like something to savour. And when I played Inside, it was the peril of the main character, the boy that you're controlling, that made me hammer it out in about a day or so, because I wanted to find out what was going to happen to him. But with that sense of threat or dread kind of removed in Cocoon, it's felt a lot closer to like a softer version of the puzzles and atmosphere in The Witness. You know, just something to kind of pick over in the back of my head whilst I'm away from the console or the computer, whatever you're playing it on. You've played this one as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Have you beaten it?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, I played through it. I played through it in pretty much one sitting.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. The guy knows his onions.
It's absolutely incredible.
He knows his onions, doesn't he?
That like organic teaching of puzzles, like in The Witness, is the perfect, or Outer Wilds, where you it doesn't. There's no words. There's just nothing other than just extraordinary design and your brain and the way. It's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It is a Metroid Brainia.
It's a bloody Metroid Brainia, isn't it?
It's a bloody Metroid bloody Brainia. Yeah, I mean, I had moments where I was like, hang on a minute, I think this might work. I'm going to try it. If this works, this game is a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Of course it fucking worked.
Of
course it worked. It's just staggering. It's absolutely staggering. Like, there were moments when I thought, no, I think this is, at some point, this is going to be too much for my brain to handle. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep track of the worlds within worlds within worlds, etc., etc. But there's something about the way the game guides you, obviously totally subtly, that just allows you to feel your way, even though there are loads of things to keep track of.
Yeah.
You don't really need to all the time of things. You can, it just is amazing at focusing your attention to solving smaller puzzles that are part of bigger puzzles, that are part of the whole thing. And that feeling never goes away. And when you think they can't change another gear, they change another gear, and your mind just absolutely is blown. It's phenomenal. It's an extraordinary achievement. And I'm really, really glad that he's left Playdead, because it means that we're now getting games of this quality from 2 studios.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that Playdead have said that their next game is going to be a 3D game, and it's been in development. That's literally the only thing we know about it.
Yeah, that's it.
It's been in development for 7 years now. Or I assume they started developing it after they released Inside, but it could have been longer, could have been shorter. But if this sort of design philosophy is retained at Playdead, even though Jeppe is not there, which I'm sure it has, because obviously it's going to be most of the same team, then we're going to be in for an extraordinary treat with whatever Playdead put out next. And also now we've got another studio to keep an eye on, because it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, it is a very you game.
Yeah. Would you like to know where we're going to fly to next month?
Hang on. Yes, Chris. Yes, so I don't know where we're going next. I don't know where we're going. I left Chris in charge of booking the plane tickets. Chris.
So we're taking a flight direct from Denmark. For next month's Around the World episode, we'll be travelling a cool 8,229 miles to South Korea.
South Korea.
Who would have
thought it?
What are we going to find to play in the land of K-pop? You can find out if you come back on December the 1st. That's how this works now.
Oh. There we go. That was our first Around the World in 80 Games trip, and we went to Denmark and we talked about Hitman and Cocoon. Oh, what a great time. Honestly, it's not as good as going to the country itself, but it is very good talking about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm so psyched to go to South Korea next month. That's going to be great. I'm so excited. Can't wait to get researching. If you're playing any games, tell us. Reach out to us on social media. We are at O3C Games on everything. Tell us what you're playing. And I tell you what, give us suggestions of games to play that are from South Korea.
Please do.
Why not?
Please do.
Yeah. And also, feel free to suggest destinations for the rest of this series, because, hey, it's up in the air. We're making it up month by month. Join us in the Discord. Go to o3c.games, hit the join link. Come and chat to us in there. You can tell us what you're playing. You can tell us where you want us to go. You can give us questions to answer in a future episode. Or you can just revel in the unadulterated joy of video games with us.
Yes, please.
We love it.
Yes,
what a great
please.
time. What a great time. Same time next month?
I reckon.
Yeah.
Do you know a game that is from South Korea?